Salutations, everybody. It is Matty here today. We're sitting down to talk about another situation with Bethesda that is quite an ugly one, particularly id Software, as there has been a major expose posted by Mick Gordon. You may have heard that name before. Mick Gordon is the composer of the Doom soundtrack as well as Doom Eternal, and this issue does date back to the release of the Doom OST, where there was a lot of controversy surrounding it. People thought that the mix was quite off, and they were correct because Mick, the one who composed the whole thing, did not work on it. So this led to a little bit of a back and forth between id Software and Mick Gordon publicly, where it all concluded, we thought, with an open letter over on Reddit from Marty Stratton, who had helped executive produce the entire Doom Eternal game as well as Doom 2016. You may be familiar with Marty. He's been in a ton of Bethesda content. He was there on stage during the Bethesda E3 showcase for both Doom Eternal as well as Doom 2016's reveal. You'll see him at QuakeCon, so you're likely familiar with Marty, and he's really at the heart of this story. But Bethesda has a hand in this too overall, in the way that they failed to mediate in this situation. And the story here is a long one. I mean, you can take a look right here because Mick posted an entire write-up over on the Medium, and yeah, 58 minutes. It's a long one, and I do recommend that you read it because I personally believe no article, no video out there is going to collectively gather all of the evidence here that Mick has posted. And it's important that you inform yourself here because what's happening is wrong. And the reason I'm here to defend Mick is because he's posted undeniable evidence, like receipts, emails, the whole 9 yards is here. And I will be showing a lot of it in this video, but I do leave it to the audience, as always, to do your own research and do read this entire article because it's one of the biggest blowups we've seen in gaming and is rightfully getting signal boosted. And I wanted to do my part as someone who covers a lot of Bethesda content. So let's not delay any further. I already gave you the backstory on how we got here. There is a summary, if you will, within the article, so you can jump around to the game's development, the OST, the aftermath of such a thing, the factual rebuttal, as well as his conclusion. Is too long, didn't read if you want to go through all of it that way, but I do recommend doing the full read at some point in time if you do care about the quality of Doom. So first and foremost, Mick Gordon, the guy who literally directed the sound of the game, has not been paid for over half of Doom Eternal's music. That blows my mind, and I'll get into it in a second here, but he writes in his summary, I haven't been paid for over half of Doom Eternal's music. The game includes more than double my music that I was contracted to produce. Rejects, mock-ups, demos, many of which were never meant for public release. I created this music as part of the development process and shared it with id Software in good faith, but id Software used the music in-game, marketing, and soundtrack and still refuses to pay me for it. So a little bit of background on this because I'm actually going through this currently with my own game, so I can offer a little bit of insight. The process here is you're going to jam music constantly. You're going to see what works, what fits tonally, what doesn't. And in my experience, what we did is we'd get a track and I go like, I like this a lot, but I don't think it's for this particular area or this particular moment. Let's stash it to the side. And it sounds like Bethesda did much of the same here with id Software. Let's stash this to the side. We're probably not going to use this Mick. And then what happens is they decided they're going to use it anyway. And so they pulled out all these demo tracks, all these potential tracks, these sample tracks, and turned them into full tracks to use in the game and did not get Mick's approval. One important thing to note, though, is that sometimes this stuff does boil down to contracts, which we're not always privy to. So for example, sometimes the composer will be totally okay saying anything I compose for you, whether it be the music, the demo, the samples, anything that I give you, you can use however you want, being the game, marketing material, official soundtrack release, whatever you want, you can do with it. Whereas it seems like Mick was much more protective, saying anything I complete and say this is final and that you approve of, that is something you can use. But it seems like here that was not in the contract. So they effectively got double the music out of this and didn't pay for it. You get what I'm saying here? So during that testing process, they were taking things that were probably said to have been scrapped and said, oh no, we're not going to use those, and actually ended up using them in the final product, which is highly disingenuous. And you should always pay someone for completed work. Whether you decide that we're going to end up using it now or not, you need to pay them because you are going to use something that they worked on. It's just that simple. Now, he actually shows emails here about how hard they crunched for this soundtrack. Yes, Crunching exists even in the audio side of things. He writes, thanks for the push, Marty. I appreciate you're busy. Making it awesome certainly takes time, but I understand the time pressures the project is under, and I can assure you that we are over here crunching as hard as possible with that in mind. I hope to jump in a call with blank later today to talk through it. 2 quick things. 1, it's obviously impossible for me to complete work on elements that haven't been completed, blank for example. I can't make a final approach on the blank until they're close to ready. Blank and I have discussed various contingencies, but I'd really like to be given a specific blank, a unique treatment. I'll keep in touch with blank on progress. I haven't been paid since December 2018, 8 months ago. I've raised this issue multiple times and haven't gotten anywhere. While I'm still happy to crunch away in good faith, I'd certainly appreciate payment for the work completed. This is ridiculous to me that this is still something that exists in our industry. And I'm not trying to white knight or get on my soapbox, but it blows my mind that companies think that they can get away with not paying people for completed work. Look, I'm not made of money. Y'all already know that. For God's sakes, look at my setup right now. Clearly, I'm not. We try to make do with what we have. But one thing I will say is, again, I'm going to reference my game here, not to sit here and flex knowledge, but more so just to educate a bit on the process based off what I've experienced. And in my case, like we were talking, like, what do vocals look like? What's the rate for that? And the person I'm working with was talking on the front of, oh no, that's a part of the completed track rate. Like we'll make this actual instrumental track. We'll add the vocals later, but don't worry, that won't be a part of the cost. One thing that people don't seem to realize in any medium, it's not just video games, it's movies, shows, illustrations, what have you, is artists don't give themselves enough credit. Music as well. They don't give themselves enough credit. And it frustrates me greatly because they are the reason why I think people synchronize so well with the things that we try to create. It's always a blending of all the elements coming together to lift up a moment, right? The visuals, the music, the voice acting, you know how it goes. You've all played video games before. But I think the music is always the punctuation mark to a big moment in a game. And especially in Doom, when there's not much talking and there's a lot of shooting, I think the music, doubly so, is even more important. Imagine if you're just listening to some fairy tale music while you're playing Doom Eternal, right? It just wouldn't fit. There is a huge emphasis on the soundtrack here, and it blows my mind that I can sit here and go like, no, if we're going to add vocals, we're going to pay you more for it because you're putting more time into the project. Like per completion, per addition to the track, we're going to pay you. If I can do that, I sure as shit know that Bethesda, I sure as shit know that id Software could do the same. That's why it's greatly frustrating here, because he lays out the actual music that was unpaid, and it's literally more than double. You'll see here that the contracted minutes of music is 2 hours and 22 minutes for a total of 4 hours, 46 minutes and 1 second, whereas the unpaid minutes of music that they took out and used was 2 hours, 24 minutes and 1 second. Again, that is crazy to me. That is ridiculous that they took more than double and went, yeah, this will surely never blow up in our face, and then went and wrote an open letter, brought Mick into bad light. I mean, it just... the lack of foresight here is fascinating, and you'll see how they didn't see it coming because they eventually tried to pay Mick to shut him up with a 6-figure sum. And I really respect that he didn't just take the money and go away, but he has a passion for his work, and he said, no, I'm not taking that. I'm going to post this here, and I'm going to get work. And he's working right now on Atomic Heart, which I know there's been, some excitement for it, but some people are kind of like in the middle on it because some reports have come out that it's not looking too hot, but we'll see how that all turns out. But in case you want to support Mick, keep an eye out on Atomic Heart. Let's keep reading, though. He writes that Doom Eternal's OST was a mess, saying it was announced with my name attached and made available for pre-order before I was contracted to produce it. Despite my alarm and constant appeals, Marty refused to do anything about the situation, leading to a 9-month delay before I could start work. So just pause real quick. The OST is the thing that's at the start of the situation, right? We're not talking about the soundtrack in-game while they are the same tracks. We're talking about the official soundtrack release where Mick did not work on that, just so that everyone can follow along. He writes, after 7 months of inaction, I reported my concerns to Bethesda. Bethesda and I negotiated the Doom Eternal OST directly without Marty's involvement. I received the contract on March 18th, 2020, just 48 hours before Doom Eternal was released. The delay was announced a week earlier, before I was under contract. The deadline was April 16th, which was 29 days later, and the contract stipulated id Software had complete creative control and would acquire access to all of my source material. Where then Marty withheld crucial details from me until 13 days before my deadline, such as potential legal trouble they faced for taking pre-orders before it was under contract, as well as details about their internally produced OST, an alternative edited from my in-game score, which they'd worked on for at least 6 months without my knowledge or involvement, which you'll see here in this email as well. He says he's been working very hard to get this done, that he's worked through Easter instead of family time, and he's been sleeping under his desk for the past few days and will continue to do so to make it possible. Again, just another testament to the fact that, like, when that's in writing, you have to recognize, no matter what, I don't care how nefarious it sounds, if you're a big company, you got to recognize, like, oh, those are digital paper trails. We don't want to have this come back to bite us in the butt, because they said right then and there, they're crunching. That's already really bad. I know in some creative instances it's a little unavoidable, but it's already really bad that someone's willingly crunching, let alone that they're just not having the foresight to do something about it to alleviate the process, especially with something that's being sold as a supplemental sale, right? We're not talking about something that needs to, in my opinion, come out right away a month after launch. As we already know, he didn't approve the release. He says in the days leading up to April 16th, Marty cut me out of the process and decided to release their alternative version instead, reducing my direct contributions to filler. Both he and id Software's lead audio designer, Chad Mossholder, didn't allow me to hear the final album and didn't seek my approval. They weren't contractually required to do so. Following that release, we all know it went terrible, and it turns out that this is amazing, right? So they release something bad and then they agree behind the scenes, we're going to do a joint statement together, okay? We're going to address this together and announce plans and how we're going to move forward because we messed up. And that would have been it, right? That would have literally been the end of it. And I bet that based off what Mick is showing here, he probably would have just left everything else in the past. But what happens afterwards is that he would expect a draft within hours, but it never arrived. And then days later, you would see the open letter over on Reddit that brought Mick Gordon into a bad light. So that is really the too long didn't read of the situation here. And again, I can only vent my frustrations because this is twice now we've seen this happen under Bethesda leadership in the last year. We saw Kotaku's report, and I know it's Kotaku, so I understand if you want to take it with a grain of salt, but we were talking about Fallout 76, which, like, I mean, you could tell by playing the game, the development of that was pretty bad. I didn't see as much mainstream coverage of that, but I did my part, and the video did really well. We got almost 250,000 views, I think it was, or like 150,000, so we did our part, and I want to make sure we do our part here, again, to shine a light on Bethesda not having the wherewithal to intervene and do something about this when clearly a situation was spiraling out of control. Now, I respect that companies in the overhead can look at this and go, all right, you know, we're not going to get involved. We're going to let you all solve it. You got to at least let the employees that you hire mediate to some degree. But when it gets to this point where someone's not getting paid for 8 months, 8 months, I mean, 11 months, I can't wrap my head around them just sitting back and going, I'm sure it's fine. And him tagging them in emails specifically saying, like, I'm crunching right now and I'm happily doing so. How is your first response to go, okay, great, keep crunching. In fact, that's awesome to hear. And the fact that they were crunching is mind blowing to me because it's a failure on design. They were having him create music for parts of the game that weren't made, which makes no goddamn sense to me. The idea of making a song for an area that has yet to exist, that's nothing more than words on a piece of paper, and then throwing it back at him and going, this is not it. Well, no, duh. You don't know what the area is going to be and how it's going to feel like in exploration, what you're going to fill it with, what enemies are going to be there. Like, there's so much there that you have to visually identify. You have to content identify before you actually throw the music in. I know, for example, Bethesda, they always talk about they start with the music. I think that's a very studio particular thing here. But in something like Doom, where you want to have the music almost feel like it's an accelerator to the action, you want to have the action existing first. Let the composer lay eyes on what's happening on screen, the effects happening on screen. What do you want to capture here? Let them go hog wild and you give your feedback then. Not have them work on full tracks and be like, here you go. And they're like, yeah, this wasn't what we were thinking. It's like, no shit. No shit. So yeah, it's extremely frustrating to see how Bethesda has let Mick down, and I just wanted to make sure I did my part and covered it. So that's everything I have to say here. I'm going to go back to resting my voice. So take great care of yourselves. Let me know what you think of all of this in the comments down below. Other than that, follow me on Twitter, follow me on Instagram. Those links are in the description down below. And a big thank you to all the patrons, all the members who continue to support the hell out of the content here. Stay sexy, stay active. I love you all. Peace.